Throughout our presentation, we encourage you to interact with us by typing in questions using the Q&A widget, which should be at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer questions at the end of the presentation, unless there are nice, juicy ones, then we'll dive right into those. A quick note, in case you are having any technical issues, please use the help button at the bottom right of your screen. You may need to enable Flash on your computer in order to optimize the webinar audio and slide deck. We are going to be recording today's session, and we will email you the recording as soon as it's available. So getting right to it. So our speakers today are Sandy Musa from Dosh and Sylvain Perrier from Mercatus. Sandy, Sylvain, great to have you guys on the webinar with me today. Would you like to just briefly introduce yourself and your companies?
Yes, thank you very much, Gaurav. Musa here from Dosh. Dosh, headquartered in Austin, Texas, is the fastest growing instant cashback platform in the US today. We were founded in 2016, directly integrating with the three major card networks, Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, in that to reward users with instant cashback wherever they shop.
Hi, Gaurav. Pleasure being here with you on the webinar. Sylvain Perrier, President and CEO of Mercatus Technologies. Mercatus is a digital commerce platform provider for some of the largest grocery retailers in the United States, as well in Canada, founded in 2005.
Great. Thank you both for joining me. I'd love to get, of course, your perspective on what we're seeing in the digital grocery market. So to kick things off, let's get right into it with the executive summary. I typically like to kick some of these things off with a very basic question, which is why, and why should we care? Over the course of 2019, we Incisiv have been studying digital trends in the grocery industry, where our investments headed, what are innovation patterns, where our consumers headed. And we've done a range of different studies over 2019 to really figure out what do we think the future of grocery will hold. While we aren't soothsayers, we hope to be broadly in the right direction when it comes to predicting both growth in spends as well as the focus from a consumer and grocer behavior. The three core elements that we found over the course of our study in 2019 have focused on growth and the size of the prize, which is how fast are we growing and how big can this be? And related to that is the focus really on customer incrementality, or is it on retention of consumers? The second is, what's the real impact of the business? Has it really been about top line growth, profitability? Where does that lie? And thirdly, what does success look like? Who are people who've been successful? And which is why this study and this digital maturity scorecard is critically important, because what we found is that grocers that have invested early on in enabling their digital capabilities, not just the front end, but also the operations, have performed significantly better than their peers. So the first slide does a quick summary of what we found in 2019, and I'll get a great panelist to also comment on that in a bit. So first up, we are seeing digital as the battleground for growth and customer relevance. For grocers to be relevant, it's no longer a line I heard about, I think, 5 years back, saying Amazon doesn't do grocery or doesn't know how to do food. That's not really the case. Digital is where our lives start. Digital is where we discover products. If grocers have to be relevant in the lives of their consumers, irrespective of their age and demographic, they have to figure out how to do this well and effectively. The size of the prize is large. We estimate, and I know our estimate is slightly larger than others, we estimate the size of the prize in just the US to be $157 billion by 2025, growing at 26% CAGR in general. And the focus is really on how do you get in there with grocery products and actually increase your basket to drive both relevance and CLV over a period of time. Of the grocers we've studied, and we've studied a fairly diverse list of grocers across the US and in Europe, we found that online ordering does add top line to the tune of 15.8% increase in top line, as opposed to a business case of about 12.3% that they had. But the challenge has been a decline in order profitability. What that means is that by the time getting top line, I'm able to grow sales, I'm not able to get the operations and the engine to deliver on that customer promise effectively. The second part we've seen is that digital maturity. Grocers that have invested in technology early have built their digital production engine early on, not just the front end, but end to end, have seen a greater return on investment. They perform better than the peer set that we studied, which I said is like the top largest grocers in the world. And we think there's something there to hit upon, which is it's about those that have invest early but are able to expand capabilities from an execution perspective throughout the operations are able to actually benefit from it. The third is we've at least the data, and again, I'm not talking about qualitative inputs right now, at least for now. We've not seen any significant difference between Europe and US grocers, even though the whole narrative of Europe being slightly ahead was the case, of course, till about a few years back. But we've not seen that. We are seeing a lot of basic fixing, tackling, web issues, experience issues still crop up, which need to be addressed. When it comes to short-term opportunities, the three key areas where we think investment is needed and needs to be focused is search and curation, the checkout process or getting to that level of frictionless, and recommendations to increase basket size. Now on that, Sylvian, I want to get to you. You have a global vantage point, and we just talked about your extensive travel to come. What do you make of this Europe-US divide, or rather lack of a divide?
Yeah, so you said it so well in the previous slide, is the harsh reality is if you look at European retailers, they were essentially the pioneers in making early investments in their digital outcome. The challenge that they are facing today, and I think that gap certainly between North American retailers and European retailers has really shrunk. And what's happening in Europe right now, because they've invested in monolithic style technology, now platforms that are highly complex, highly expensive to implement, they've really run the course with those technologies. So they're actually flocking now to the United States to understand what are U.S. grocers doing? Why have U.S. grocers invested so much to try to really catch up? And I think the U.S. looks at Europe to say, their support paths, the way that they really close the loop with the customers is significantly stronger in Europe versus North America. I would say those are the kind of the two elements that I'm seeing right now.
Great, and you also gave me a great point which helps me segue into the third point, which is as much as we're talking about digital maturity today, as much as we're saying digital is core to growth, digital is not a site revamp. You just don't put in a new platform and say, you're digital now, growth is going to come your way. The nuts and bolts of grocery, of execution are a huge part of what makes success possible. It's also not about an immediate order. It's actually driving CLV over a period of time. It could be 90, 180 days to drive frequency of order, getting basket size up, and getting store attachment for the buy online, pick up in store, and other pieces that are there. The critical part, and that's why the element of profitability is so important, is we have to evolve our business operations to go the digital, physical, the picking and packing and produce needs to be part of that entire story. Without it, really can't have digital success. And Sandy, I want to kind of get you in here on the last point, which is it's really not about digital versus physical retail, and it's just not digital in isolation. How do you see both of these things coming together in your experience?
Yeah, and it's definitely been a challenge. So we're trying to really redefine the grocery experience for the customer. And that means obviously utilizing digital technology to reach those customers wherever they are. Dosh is specifically obviously mobile first. And so what we've seen is we're trying to help and aid our retail partners and our grocery partners so that they continue to see success with brick and mortar locations from mobile. But it's a threat from online and mobile-first grocers, which we've noticed has led to those specific grocers we're talking about when we talk about revamping the digital experience, who are evolving their business operations. One specific grocery partner with huge national footprint has come a very long way with online ordering online and then curbside delivery, if you will. And we really have to constantly evolve how we're messaging the consumer, especially with mobile. If you think about savvy shoppers, predominantly millennial, Gen Z consumers, they're relying on smartphones to connect with their favorite grocers and really automate the shopping experience. So as you say here in this last point, it's not just a site revamp, but really creating a lifetime value in messaging key customers wherever they are on the move.
Great. And then we'll spend now a couple of slides on just the first part, which is growth. So the first piece, and we've put only a couple of slides here because, saying the size of the prize is large isn't the objective of the webinar. But the key insights here that we kind of mentioned is, A, it's a large and growing pie. That's a large and growing part, not just in terms of digital orders, but the confluence of online and physical. So buy online, pick up in store, click and collect is again going to grow incrementally over the next couple of years. How we see the state of digital grocery is represented across two slides here. The first is, along with the fact that there's high growth, the question of whether or not grocery is being disrupted or will be is no longer the case or question. The walls are coming down or closing in, whichever is the right metric you're going to go with. There is a fight for this share of stomach in terms of a share of wallet. We are seeing things like deli, fresh food, restaurant delivery apps, third-party delivery services, kind of all closing or at least blurring the barriers between what constitutes a true grocery delivery service or not. If we have a great deli offering, should we actually be on the consumer's top of mind for a lunch break, for a lunch order, to get the fresh sandwich that they really want? And that's a huge part of where we're competing it, because a grocery retailer isn't really going to be competing with just a grocery retailer tomorrow. With these walls and barriers coming in, it's no surprise that we're seeing partnerships across divisions. So Ocado and Kroger, great idea of focusing on the execution, the picking piece. Obviously, partnership with third-party delivery services, and then Amazon on Whole Foods. So wherever your perspective may be, definitely made the industry look up and kind of think about what does food, what does delivery kind of mean from an overall experience. And the reason this is critical is because for any grocer who sees their business as just being fresh delivery and digital as a way to augment that as a sales channel without looking at the other aspects is kind of missing the trees for the woods. And the second part is the impact piece. Now, this is interesting because we actually looked at performance of these top grocers across US and Europe. What we found is that while sales have gone up, so 15.8% incremental revenue, a number I quoted earlier, we've seen a decline in order profitability. So what's happened is that while we've invested in the digital platform, we've really not reaped all the benefits, which is often a function of things like picking efficiency at the back end, because if that's not really the case for fresh items, for small items that make up a basket, then that's a challenge. And on the other side, there is also often order leakage up top. Sandy, I know we talked about it when we were kind of chatting earlier. What do you make of this challenge of order leakage, and how can grocers kind of look at addressing that?
Yeah, and it's a concern for sure. So grocery stores and our partners today, and as we've discussed in previous slides here today, they're operating on a slim profit margin per item. So instead, we want to affect top line revenues with volumes. Our retail partners who've tested online ordering specifically have seen innovative success and subsequently huge appreciation from their customers. But many are traditional grocery institutions whereby their in-store locations aren't tied to online ordering. So that leakage is coming from two separate platforms, if you will. One is in-store, a consumer walks in, makes a purchase. We're able to track that revenue down to that specific grocery location. Some online grocers today are still really working on that back-end piece whereby we are struggling to see the revenue directly tied to their online ordering site. And this, of course, is not taking into account online and mobile-first groceries. I know Walmart's done fantastically well in 2019, and of course, the behemoth Amazon.
Yep, and they're towards the top of our list for the digital maturity piece, and I'll get to it right now with a quick piece on what's behind it. Now, what you see is an excerpt from the analysis, but we basically analyzed the top 80 grocers. This presentation in the report I think covers the top 75. Looked at them across a range of different attributes, from what do they have on their site, traffic, and other pieces which are outside of which basically represent the entire digital presence of the brand, across elements from a shopper perspective of research and discovery. Help me discover product, help me order, make it frictionless, fulfill it, and then engagement and service. And we've done this across a different set of brands. The two things, as much as we love data, we love benchmarking and doing these kind of reports, 2 points of pragmatism need to come through. First up, this is an assessment at a point of time. The assessment often reflects the investment innovation that's being made and we recognize right now. So it's a point in time. This will evolve and change as we audit things again on a quarterly basis and refresh things. The other piece is that from an impact perspective, this is only the digital aspect. We are going to expand this to the fulfillment in-store experience and all of those pieces, and that will be as a part of the execution. So just if you want more details on the data, what's behind it, site assessment, or if you want a custom assessment for just your site, feel free to reach out to us after the program and we'll send that over to you. So this is a quick set about what the data is. One quick insight about what the data found, and then we'll get into the meat of how we see brands performing across research, frictionless commerce, fulfillment, and customer engagement. This we thought was an interesting piece of insight, and I called it out at the beginning. We've seen digital leaders in grocery, which shorthand in case the text is too much to understand, the chart is complicated. It very simply means that if you invested in digital early, you've made money off it. And what we found is that the investment or the return that these grocers have got are close to 2.2x higher than their peer set or competitors. So very clearly, investment in digital, investment in getting the capabilities ready to just turn on online ordering, expose my products on the web, and enable these different parts of fulfillment have driven growth. We are, by the way, seeing a similar correlation across all the different data sets that we're studying in the retail, which is apparel, specialty, and even the restaurant industry. So very critically, investment in digital with those aspects in has been driving growth. Getting to the 4 core aspects of the customer experience and how and where it's making an impact is this. So first is research and discovery. Some of you, as you kind of read out the text, research and discovery is at its simplest about, with the large range of SKUs that grocers have, with the large amount of products you want to push to the consumer, how can we actually reduce the cognitive overload that they have through search, through curation, through other aspects which make it actually easier for them to understand what you sell and make it relevant for what they want to buy. And there are elements of personalization in it as well. We've seen the use of filters where in 97% don't allow you to filter or hide unavailable products no filtering. You have only about 4 filters per listing page. All these data points, some here and some in the report, that talk to how we aren't doing enough to reduce that cognitive data overload burden for them. Target and Ocean in Europe are doing extremely well when it comes to allowing for this level of research and discovery. And from a performance perspective, if you want to think about whether you're doing well in research and discovery or not, is to think of the top of your funnel. If you're getting a lot of slippage at the top of your funnel, then it means your research discovery process is broken, be it at the PLP or PDP perspective. There is, however, a bit of nuance in terms of regional and larger grocers. How do they deal with it? Sylvain, want to get your perspective in on, is there a difference in how regional and large grocers deal with the research and discovery element?
Yeah, absolutely. And first off, let me say thank you so much for mentioning the word funnel, which is how do you manage a customer from point to point? So from the moment of research and discovery to the process of checkout. And then the fundamental difference that exists between large retailers and smaller regional retailers is the fact that the bigger players in the market have made strong investments in their search technology, and even deeper than that, they've actually invested in strong data governance principles. So knowing the data, curating that data, making sure the product images are available more so. And the 5 retailers you have listed on this slide, and some of them I worked with, have done a phenomenal job in doing that. And the reality is when you're a smaller retailer, you may not have had the capital to be able to do this, or not taken the time and invested in curating and coming up with some sort of concept of data governance. And unfortunately, the top of your quote-unquote sales funnel and your whole notion of discovery really starts to suffer, and you end up with a lot of frustrated retailers, frustrated shoppers that may just decide to go to your competitor.
No, that's a fair point. And the next slide actually talks to a bit of that. And so what we've tried to do in the deck and in the report as well that you guys can read is we've tried to give you a tearaway or a takeaway that you can actually go back and think more about. And the point that Sylvain said actually hits upon this purplish red, my colorblind description of color version at the bottom of the screen, which basically says, search isn't really about just putting in a search platform and with other aspects there. The difficult parts of data, the data setup, the taxonomy definition, the integration of content, the linkages there, and how rich. That's what makes search relevant. That's what makes you as a consumer find what you're looking for. And those are things that are absolutely critical from a focus perspective. There's one thing that you need to focus on to get the top of the funnel right. It's really going to be search. I'll do a quick note in terms of as we think about these slides, the way all of the individual slides are laid out is we have things on the left that talk about table stakes, which is what you should be doing, and differentiating capabilities, which not a lot of people are doing, but those are things that are interesting to kind of focus on and do. The only other thing that we've seen have a higher impact on conversion is the integration of UGC, which is user-generated content, especially as it relates to rating, reviews, and unbiased opinion on PDPs and things of that sort, because that drives greater authenticity to the data, to the search results so far. So that kind of covers, from a research and discovery perspective, the first part of the funnel. Just help me discover, help me curate, help me make sure that whole part of the experience is easy for me. Then comes to the second, which I'm sure that if you've not heard the word frictionless commerce and shopping, you've been probably living under the rock, because I think it's been beaten to death, or being beaten to death at least effectively. So what does it really mean, right? So frictionless experience really gets the point of how do I get to this point of conversion commerce quickly with fewer clicks, tasks that I want to do. It could be a repeat order, it could be whatever else. It's kind of built into that entire experience. So it just feels, to actually rip off Geico, so easy a caveman could do it, or a cave person could do it, if I'm being very politically correct. Sandy, Sylvain, both of you played this area of frictionless experiences, are helping clients work through that. Want to get your perspective on, how are grocers thinking about this entire piece? And Sandy, I'll let you go first, and then I'll let Sylvain kind of comment on that.
Thank you, Gaurav. Frictionless is definitely a key word, both when talking to retailers and internally with us at Dosh. We are trying our very best to help grocers recognize the value in seamless retail experiences, whether online or in-store, especially when it comes to the checkout. For those familiar with Dosh on the line today, the platform doesn't require the customer to do any work in order to receive that cash back at the transaction point or point of sale. And that really is what we are trying to do with regards to ease of ordering and ease of checkout. Now, when it comes to their technology, the grocer's technology, whether that be Kroger, Target, and H-E-B, obviously we don't touch that part of the system. But what we do want to eventually become seamless is customers knowing that a transaction via their Dosh platform will mean a frictionless and seamless experience. So no receipt uploads, direct integration to card networks, which means cash back within a few seconds from card authorization to card cleared. And that's what we are seeing from case studies and conducting research that is attributing to lifetime value for grocers, with customers returning roughly 10x in a month-long campaign period when offered that frictionless cashback.
Yeah, next, that's quite impressive.
Yeah, it's a fantastic. I'm going to toot my own horn, of course. It's a fantastic platform, and it does stand away a little bit aside from some of the other players in our market.
Sylvain, from your perspective, the frictionless checkout, what have you seen working, or pitfalls that you think grocers kind of fall in love with and forget it?
Yeah, I think when you look at the socioeconomic and demographical profile of the shoppers that use digital e-commerce in the grocery vertical, the reality is that the age range has really stabilized across from the boomers into Gen X, Gen Y, and the millennials. And so the reality is we're seeing some retailers that sometimes are too focused on the user experience being more about the younger generation. And there is a reason to do that, and that's fine. But the reality is, more often than not, what we try to educate our retailers is, if you know you're going to have both a younger and an older consumer, you really need to focus on putting them at the center of the experience. Truly understand your customer's journey and their path, and make it really, really easy, and let that journey and the journey mapping and that process drive the technology that you need to bring in, and not to overly make it so complex. At the end of the day, The reality is why shoppers go online to buy groceries. It's because they're time sensitive, they're time strapped, and it needs to be faster and more convenient than going to a grocery store. And so we try to educate them on doing that as best as we can.
Makes sense. And as a follow-up, I'm curious to know, you talked about the demographic shifts and, the boomers and the millennials. Is there a way in which the intuitive design would differ? Is it about fewer steps? How would the demographics play a role in the experience? Do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great question. So the reality is, I'll take myself for example. I'm in my mid 40s. I wear glasses, and I'm at a point in my life where.
Can I do the okay boomer to you then? Is that allowed?
No, I'm Gen X, so I'm okay. I'm just on the edge of that. But the reality is if you take me as an example, I'm at a point in my life where the fonts have to be a bit bigger. And I don't have the patience to deal with things that are more complex. And we're seeing that more often as the population ages. The reality is your user experience needs to be very reflective of them. If you look at the younger generation, they're really more used to using, if you think in the context of mobile, using single-use applications, right? So if you think Instagram, TikTok, and kind of Snapchat, the reality is using, for that younger generation, using an application that's cumbersome that does too many things is a bit of a turnoff for them. And the reality is this space is becoming highly commoditized in terms of the application use and what it can do. So you have to take that into context. So make it easy for me to find something and really make it easy for me to pay for it. And then if there's an opportunity for me to discover more beyond the checkout and the purchasing process, feed that to me when necessary.
Well, that's a great way of putting it, which is and that I guess goes to the point about aligning with clear shopper goals and what you wanted, which is in and out quickly with things I want to do. And if there's an increment, that's fantastic and great. And on that, right? So we'll do a quick point on the second point of ease of ordering. If that talk to, of course, frictionless experiences, how you can get to the element of being intuitive, quick, as well as, I guess, reflective of your demographic, fonts, alignment, all of the other things would just make it easier and align with other experiences that people are using. That's what gets to frictionless. So it's high intuition, so low cognitive overload in terms of execution. When it comes to takeaway, right? So our big takeaway for this as we analyze is, so really there are two areas of focus. The first gets to the point of efficiency of checkout. So quick, one click in and out. It could be integration into payments and loyalty, everything else that makes that entire commerce transaction quicker and faster without any problem. The second is slightly more trickier, which is when you get to increasing the cart size, integrating with elements like inventory, loyalty, which drive the cart up, but are more difficult to do from an execution perspective because it obviously relies on greater data and all of that. The other piece which I just want to kind of talk here before we go to the next phase is because I brought up the funnel on the first piece for the research and discovery. What we found is that best-in-class retailers who do a good job of getting this part of the execution, which is the ease of ordering and frictionless piece at a high level, convert about 75% of shoppers who are at that part of the funnel, which means an extremely high conversion rate from consideration to cart and to checkout, as opposed to median, which is closer to 50% and lower in classes actually significantly down the trail. So clearly hugely impactful because the moment you know how to shop and shop somewhere quickly, that's the behavior you want to repeat. That gets us to our third point, which is we've figured out how to discover products and research them and curation. We've talked about how quickly it might be to get commerce done. This is the point of fulfillment where really the experience comes to life or is broken because things run so smoothly till the time you actually have to pick, pack, ship, or preserve products, right? It's really, really different at that point in time. When we talk about this entire execution piece where fulfillment is a huge part of obviously that experience, the innovation or the investments are often in making sure or have to be in when you're picking fresh, produce or things for that matter, smaller products, can we do it efficiently? Do we know how to pick them? Are we training our associates to pick the right kind of produce? Because when you go and pick out a piece of fruit, I'm sure test for tenderness and other things, but do you trust the store associate? Do you trust the brand to actually deliver the produce to you the way that you want to? And that's a difficult piece, because in addition to things like online order slotting and of course, figuring out when you can pick it up or curbside other things, that's a huge part of what that impact and experience is. Because if that order is wrong, if the produce isn't good, if the picks that were made by the store associates aren't where they need to be, that's a poor experience and that's a churn point. The other reason why this is so critical, and I'll go back to a data point I led with earlier, is that this is profit central. If you don't get this right from an efficiency perspective, from a quality perspective, this is where we bleed out customers. This is where we bleed out margin. And Sylvain, I want to kind of get to you on this now. I know we focus the conversation on technology and the experience pieces, but a huge part of this is enabling store associates and making sure that they're enabled for success. How does technology kind of enable them to get this fulfillment piece and other aspects for them to kind of deliver at the level that I guess now expected of them?
Yeah, and think of it, and you said it so well in terms of where this is where you bleed your margin. And the words I like to use in this part of the experience, it's what's called fast and fresh. And so you've covered the fresh part. The fast part, and when you think of the associates, it goes beyond training and making sure they pick the right produce or the right center of store items. It's really about what pieces of technology can come in to really support that. And the right piece of technology is typical, very much associated with the volume of transaction any given location may be facing on a weekly basis. So a store that may be only doing 5 to 10 transactions a week, using some form of paper-based process to be able to pick and pack will be absolutely fine. But when you're dealing with a location that's doing north of 500 transactions on a weekly basis with maybe an average cart of, call it $250, the reality is you're going to be dealing with picking technology that's going to enable you to do things like multi-pick, zone pick, and wave pick. And the challenge becomes not just the support of that technology in the context of that ecosystem at the store level, but more so if a retailer is faced with a high churn of employees at any point in the whole chain of the process, there's going to have to be a strong program to really make sure that that idea is refreshed. Now, none of this, and this is the beauty about technology in the world that we live in, nothing is unfortunately static. Things evolve, things move forward, and business concepts really in technology really needs to support that notion.
Awesome. So our second slide on fulfillment, this is what I kind of mentioned, which is this is where profit goes to die. What we've seen is that for third-party fulfillment, for reserve and collect, for curbside, we are seeing grocers beat margins. Not terribly, but it's something that's actually come at a cost. To the aspect of what Sylvain mentioned, the elements of fresh and fast, we have to make sure that this hardest thing to do, which is get the margin per order up, improve the in-store attachment, the impact and linking it to things like customer life cycle, the thing that Sandy mentioned, kind of measuring over a period of 90, 180 days, understanding those points of attachment and enabling associates to actually, not be static, but improve on the speed of picking, on the quality of picking is going to be a huge part of the execution. So this is a very much nuts and bolts process pieces, but still a core part of the digital experience, because this is a huge aspect of how success and not delivering on this well leads to a significant churn from an execution perspective. Now this gets us to the last piece from a consumer journey perspective, which is customer engagement and service. If the first three were about discovery and curation, frictionless ordering, and finally getting your product, which is the fulfillment, this is about how well things are handled, which is how well was the customer engaged. Am I responding to them in a quick and meaningful manner? Am I empathetic in my reply? What are aspects of profile and preference management that are there? which basically, reduce errors, make sure that, you respond well to customers. All of that is kind of covered within this element. Now, what we found is, again, this is an interesting list. We found pretty much Europe be slightly ahead in terms of features deploy and what they're doing from an expansion perspective. We are thinking of expanding this to cover more social elements, which we did this time around, but we plan to do in the future. Now, on this, because I know we have about 25 minutes left, so I want to get to a couple of different things. So first up, I'll go to the next slide, but I'll ask Sandy to kind of comment on customer engagement and service as a core part of the digital journey. So Sandy, I know this is the world that you and Dosh inhabit. What are some of the trends and best practices that you're seeing across in this area?
There are some points in previous slides, Gaurav, that are so relevant to what Dosh does and how we partner with grocery retail partners today. Loyalty and personalization matters absolutely most from the studies and results and metrics we've seen from our grocery users and our grocery campaigns. When we're able to display a more personal message or offer, rather, to our user base, we're then showing our commitment to them as a customer. Two different things. At first, you're a user. When we start showing you we care about what you're looking for and we care about what you're after in whatever vertical it might be, you become a true customer and a loyal one at that. A Kroger customer may be vastly different to that of a BJ's customer, and I'm sure there are huge differences, and therefore the message cannot be the same. I think what we've seen in the time that I've been with Dosh is that we may start with a standard stagnant offer of 5% cashback, let's see, for that customer going into a Kroger. However, what we want is to keep them engaged with us. It's a very competitive landscape, especially with the world of grocery. When we look at varying loyalty offers and really personalizing the message, whether that's via direct email channels, social marketing, or in push notifications, we've seen variances of sales lift of 132% when we've created various loyalty offers for our grocery partners, which speaks volumes in itself.
Great, and at least on the personalization piece, because we try to at least figure out from marketing communications, personalization piece, the impact, and then what those pieces of impact have been. We've also seen similar aspects from the data we analyze. So we've seen personalization have a significant impact on both getting the basket up from a cross-sell or upsell perspective, and we're seeing better utilization of that, especially as we think about driving store attachment. So if you're at pickup, other elements from a messaging perspective. So the basket and the value that we're creating is beyond the original order. It can't just be the basket that you have online, which would be whatever the range is between 70 to $100, but really driving benefit across the board. Sylvain, on the topic of customer engagement itself, a slightly harder question. So we've talked about what retailers are doing in different phases, but what are they not doing? What should they be focused on?
Yeah, I think if you look at, specifically in the last part of a lot of retailers that may be doing a mix match of different types of fulfillment, whether it be home delivery, click and collect, or curbside pickup, I think they're failing to understand that in a moment of crisis where there's a situation or a bad experience, that they may not be deploying the most appropriate support path. So for example, if you're pulling up to a store and you're not going to wait 25 to 35 minutes for your grocery order to be brought out to your car, and you're certainly not going to want to pick up the phone to talk to someone that is sitting at a help desk somewhere to deal with the situation. And I think that's where retailers are not necessarily understanding the temperament of the consumer in that heated moment and the best way to rescue the situation.
Got it. And I'm curious, as a part of the, before we get to the rankings and the analysis, I'm curious across the 4 stages, which is the research discovery, the frictionless commerce, the fulfillment, and the customer engagement and service, and the aspect of personalization that now, I guess grocers are doing. Where do you think grocery retailers need the most amount of help or focus? Where do they think that they're the most deficient in? And it's open house. Either of you can kind of share your feedback or comments.
Yeah, it really depends on the type of retailer and where their executive team is the strongest. So if you have an executive team that's really strong at operations, operations inside the store and fulfillment will endeavor and will do well, and vice versa if you have a marketing group. I think that the answer to your question fundamentally is I have yet to see a retailer that fundamentally understands the overall best practices and experience across all of those four phases in terms of unifying them in the most strategic and tactful way to be able to drive towards success. I think there's always something lacking. I will tell you, hands down, in the U.S., the biggest challenge right now remains, and again, we talked about this in a previous slide, anything to do with data, because the archaic systems that they have today don't lend themselves very well to the world of digital.
Yeah. Yep, and I would agree with that. Actually, we've been doing a piece of research focused on again, trends and impact for like 2020, 2021, and we've seen that come up as a consistent theme, which is let my insights be free and kind of actually using them to impact the business. Huge area of focus, but definitely saddled with years of legacy, and kind of transforming that is just really, really hard. So with that, we're getting to the last, I guess, 8 or 9 minutes from a content perspective. We'll get to the rankings and what the rankings reveal. So you've seen excerpts of the rankings across the different slides where we showcase the different leaders, the top 5 across different elements from a consumer journey. What this does is kind of just represents all of the retailers. What we have on the next slide is I think just the top 20 with details present in the report where you can talk to or rather see who are the leaders, where are they doing well, what are they challenged by. The other thing to kind of point out here, this measures digital maturity. There are aspects of the brand and impact that it doesn't. For example, one of my favorite grocers is Trader Joe's. It's the bottom of the pile when it comes to digital maturity, but they're doing really well as a brand. So while this is great, it's not really representative of overall performance. And again, this is a point in time. So with the caveats put in, as the analyst hat on, this is kind of what the rankings look like. So the digital maturity leaderboard across all of the different formats that we studied, which is warehouse, hypermarket, supermarket, and we tried to go with a taxonomy and a categorization which is slightly more global because our studies are global in that sense. We found BJ's and Carrefour the top of the list. Slightly surprised to see BJ's there, but we also understand that where brands are from a innovation and where they are from a platform perspective is often is reflected in where their performance may be. And what we're seeing is the top brand, which is the top 10 for sure, and we're seeing Walmart and Target right up there. Walmart, incidentally, because like I said, we've been tracking this over a period of time, has done extremely well to get their platform and the overall experience up. It's one of the larger brand that we've been fairly impressed by. And on here, and I'm going to get Sylvain to kind of perhaps provide a bit more commentary on the US-Europe divide. So, Sylvain, I know we talked about the US-Europe thing earlier. Do you want to provide any other context to the North America-Europe comparison? I know because this is a point in time, are you seeing this as a work of an investment cycle? Is there something else here that kind of led to this gap between Europe, who was ahead, but now it's almost like a 50-50 split when it comes to the top 10 for sure?
Yeah, I think if you look at Europe specifically, and I take Carrefour as an example, it's a great example of a retailer that has started to make the strides as of early January of this year to make the decision to look at making a substantial investment in what the future of their platform is going to be. I think we're also seeing this across the United States, and we're likely on the precipice of what would be considered the Generation 3, Generation 4 of e-commerce platforms in the U.S., where you have large Tier 1 retailers considering making some substantial investments. You also have niche, very smaller players, and when I say niche, sub 25 locations that are actually know that they have an ability to potentially succeed in this space, that are going to be making some strategic investments as well. And
that's been fairly consistent with what we're seeing. I'm curious, right, if you guys have a perspective on whether these investments, as I know these are the top 20 and there's a longer list, but are the investments more focused on a capability, by which I mean, say, turning on delivery or third-party delivery? Is it personalization, or is it actually looking at almost like a gut re-platform of capabilities? Is there a view on, is it very focused on use cases and outcomes, or is it more we have to blow everything up and start again? Where's the kind of broad sentiment at from your perspective? Do you guys have an opinion?
Yeah, and from my perspective, there are some retailers on there that will be doing foundational changes to how they approach e-commerce, and the other ones in there will be doing some incremental augmentation of some of the services that they offer, which includes layering in ancillary technology to do so.
Got it. And Sandy, from your perspective, what are the more focused use cases around, either loyalty or marketing, the world that you guys look at, that you're seeing the greatest amount of investment and traction in?
Really, it comes down for us, and you mentioned it earlier, is three main key objectives, and the investment is coming really to push increased average order value, so basket size, push frequency of purchase. If you're coming in once, how can we get you in the door more often that week, more often that month? And obviously sales. But hopefully we'll get to this soon, is really just trying to prove out incrementality and attribution for our partners. That's always a big question mark, and that can always really hinder moving forward with a partnership, and proving that out whilst we've been successful to date is always a sticky point.
And actually, that's a great segue, because we've been getting a few questions. So luckily, people have been paying attention. So one of the questions is actually about incremental sales. So it says, so the business case for digital seems to be about getting incremental sales, especially from, and also getting new customers. Are there any best practices that can help us get there? Sandy, I guess that would be a question right up your alley.
Yes, of course. And it's a question that gives me the heebie-jeebies every time I hear it anyway. But, attribution and incrementality, and how do we know that Dosh subscriber wouldn't have shopped from this supermarket chain anyways, is a constant question of contention. And as I said, we've had some fantastic partners on the platform to date. So we've really had to work hard in our response of measuring attribution and positioning offers for new customers specifically. On the first piece, what we do on our platform in order to measure attribution is withhold exposure of the offer. So anything that's in-app banners, push notifications, and email marketing during the campaign from a representative subset of our users. The purpose of withholding that offer from some of our subscribers is to really measure the impact on the consumer behavior by scrutinizing some of those key metrics such as revenue, transaction amount, and frequency of purchase. So on the other side of that holdout, you've got an exposed group. Those exposed users are able to see the offer within the app. They're able to see the offer within push notifications, direct email marketing, and also social. And so what we're doing is measuring both of those exposed and controlled groups to understand and measure the effectiveness of that marketing and the impact of that marketing, and whether it drove incremental sales, incremental average order value, and incremental repeat in purchase. On the new customer piece, because we are directly integrated to Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, which when you think about those three card networks, they cover over 97% of transactions in continental US. We are able to see first-party data once we have a campaign live. There are a few grocery partners we have to date who do prefer only to message an offer to a new customer. If we've seen that Sandy Musa has made a transaction in the past 2 months for an evolution of the campaign, let's say in January, we will exclude Sandy Musa from receiving that offer again, because we physically can see her transaction history from a previous campaign. So when I will log into the app, I will only see a new customer offer. As soon as I transact, I will be dynamically placed out of being offered that 5% or 10% cashback again. Hopefully that answers that question.
It does, and it also brings about a word that I've not heard very often, heebie-jeebies, because the best exponent of that word is actually Sacha Baron Cohen as King Julian in Madagascar. That's my image. So the moment you said that, yeah, my mind went to Madagascar. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I stole it from him directly.
Yeah, that was a great troll. So before we regress any further, I'll get Sylvain to kind of pull us back up with another question that we've gotten, and I think it's a difficult and perhaps politically sensitive one. So I'm going to just lob it over to you, which is, so have retailers surrendered their digital roadmap or closed off their ecosystem to third-party delivery? How are they going to innovate with this kind of a mindset? So it's a tough one, I guess, both in terms of innovation and roadmap. So when do you have a perspective there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you look at retailers that have been potentially late to the game of e-commerce and have decided to sway towards technologies that are more focused heavily on delivery and offer limited experience and limited functionality in the hands of the consumer. The concept of these isolated, closed-off islands that are called marketplaces. I think to a certain extent, a lot of those technologies, what they do is they favor very much the organization deploying them, or to a certain extent, they help some retailers. But the harsh reality is, if you are a retailer trying to achieve something that's really great for your shoppers, those technologies are closed off from third parties. So if a retailer wanted to pull in call it a recipe technology or pulling a great technology like Dosh, the reality is that these marketplace solutions don't make that easy to do, and quite frankly are a detriment to some of the retailers.
Got it. And I know we're towards the end of our call. I have one more question, and I'll let this be open to either one of you. The question is, what about the pace and direction of the development of originally pure-play digital players like Amazon? Where are they ahead and where are they followers? Curious if either of you have a perspective, and I'll share mine after you've either gone ahead or said pass.
Yeah, I can jump in. I mean, if you look at a development cycle like an Amazon, notwithstanding some of the technologies that they have to be mindful of protecting some of the intellectual property that they have in the market, you'll see minor incremental changes in certain elements. If you look at some of the competing technologies that are out there, like a Mercatus, I mean, our development cycle is fairly aggressive. It's new features every 30 to 45 days. I would say where some of these companies are ahead, like an Amazon, is essentially the ability to onboard large-scale amount of content and data in being able to leverage those, but even more so leverage the analytics behind that to be able to really tailor, quote-unquote, what's being presented from a product perspective back down to the shopper.
Great, and I would agree with that, which is, and I think the thing that Amazon has been doing is pushing grocers to look at and execute fast. The second part of the question, which is addressed, where are they ahead? I think the use of data analytics and doing that on scale is there. Where are they followers? I believe, and this is based on my experience with after the Whole Foods integration piece, they haven't been able to get the process integration and the fulfillment piece at the level that they want. While they can do the bulk DC shipping, I guess 10 times and more and do it extremely quickly, the promise, or at least getting fresh food, good food, and I mean produced mostly on time, making sure that if the experience in the store needs to align to drive more picking, so when digital ordering was turned on, the fact that you have pickers en masse trying to pick up products, there's really no space in the grocery store. I think those elements of the hard truths of retail processes and store associate experiences are things where I think there are followers and there are ways to go in terms of learning. So that's the only other question that we had. We've got one other question, but I'll kind of pause on that for later because we're at the end of our time and we'll respond back via email. So with that, I want to thank Sandy and Sylvain for the time that they spent with us, for the perspective that they shared. I want to do a quick recap of what we're going to talk to. First and fundamentally, this is a large and growing market. It's a market that we've seen people who invested early on from a digital perspective perform better. They have seen great signs of success as it comes to driving top line and naturally growing their consumer base from an incremental sales perspective. However, this has come at a cost, be it partnership with third-party vendors, be it turning on delivery, because it really hasn't been as profitable as it should. Where grocers are now is they need to significantly augment their digital process and execution capabilities, because the promise of this experience isn't just a single digital, clean, beautiful interface. It's the nuts and bolts of delivery and grocery and execution, all of those pieces. As we continue to do this report next year, we are seeing the top performance across US and Europe be similar, but we also believe it's a factor of the digital investment innovation cycle and where grocers are at. So we expect this to change slightly as we continue to do this report over a period of time. If anyone has any questions on the data, methodology, looking for more quarterly data, any other feeds, feel free to reach out to us. That's what we do. I'm happy to share any insights from the study or beyond if it's helpful to you. And with this concludes our webinar. As a reminder, you'll receive an email when the on-demand recording of today's event is available. Please download the report from the Winsight Grocery Business site and reach out to us with questions and feedback. On behalf of Winsight Grocery Business and Incisiv, I want to thank all of you for joining us. I know, it was between us and binging on Netflix, so we're glad you made the right choice.